All right, I wanted to say thank you for joining. Thank you for joining. Not sure if everyone can hear me. All right, welcome to my live. I wanted to take the time to say thank you to my subscribers, and without you, I would not have an audience. Thank you for those who have returned, and thank you for those who have joined me in this live for the very first time. Can you please take the time to like, comment, and subscribe throughout the video as you feel comfortable with? Thank you for doing that. I am your quirky ASF, and you already know what those acronyms are, Hood Genealogist. I do not need any permission to study my ancestry and the history of this world. So to that, there will be no certifications. I don't need your certification displayed throughout this live to say that I'm a genealogist, that you deemed me a genealogist. I don't need your certification. All right, now that we are over that, welcome back. We are free despite their motives. We are already free. Let's go. Today, I will discuss the reclassification of the Amerindian to Negro, Black, Mulatto, Colored, Afro-American, Black American, and at its current label, the African American. Now, there is an order that I am taking based on not where I am in research, but how I am presenting my channel to you. Everyone that has been following me already knows that I have already reached to the 1300s and deep dive into ancient ancestors with my genealogy. So I'm not stuck at 1865. I'm not stuck at my second great grandparent, even though I've met at least 2 to 3 of my great grandparents. I'm not stuck there. It's just that I'm going in a sequence to bring you along to study the genealogy, which means that I have to go over haplogroups. I have to go over laws and treaties. I have to give you a picture of what is going on a timeline, because our history is on a timeline. Genealogy is on a timeline, generation to generation. All right. There are many disputes, and I do not see how anybody would argue against these facts that the Amerindian, and I will be presenting to you about the Amerindian. Don't care who likes it, don't care who accepts it, don't care who wants to talk about it. I really don't care about that. It is. I don't understand how anybody will be arguing against the facts that the Amerindian, who share the same phenomes as every indigenous person of color across the world, which is why I believe they switched the identity, and there is proof and evidence that they switched the identity of the original Aboriginal Amerindian with what we call paper genocide. Everyone, a lot of us don't really need paper to know this. It's just that we probably had to come across the transmission of secondary information via that smartphone to be able to collectively agree, understand, weigh options, weigh in what we already knew, what our ancestors told us, what we know to have happened, generalizing a specific group of people. All right. Now, how does one do that? How does an entire identity of an entire racial group, and we remember racial is skin color, and then the ethnicity is what your actual nation of where you actually live, like American or Canadian. How does a person switch identities like that? Simply, I'll tell you, by a stroke of a pen written on a piece of paper. But before beginning, I need to go over haplogroups that are inherited from our ancestors. Give me 1 second. All right. We know that haplogroups are organisms within the cells that are passed on from each parent. And that is, you get 50% of your DNA, which is your genomes and phenomes, from your maternal line, which is your mother's line. And then you get 50% of those, of your DNA, which is your part of your phenomes and your genomes, from your dad as well. And that is how lineage, pedigree, descent is established. It is your family line that you inherit from your parents and your ancestors' DNA. It is what creates the branches on the tree, your family tree, that grows like a real tree outside. Now, I have a lot of subscribers overseas as well. Just like my podcast that I have, I began voicing off or creating podcasts that I've created in like 2019, majority of my subscribers are from overseas. So I thank you for that. And so being able to, captivate their attention, I appreciate that. And basically all of my subscribers. Now, your family tree grows, again, just like a real tree outside. It needs vitamins, it needs nutrients, which is DNA, sun, water, soil, and energy to grow. Now, let us take a look at this. A look at these haplogroups that I have. I'm going to go over them in 1 second. Now, there are mtDNA, which is your mitochondrial DNA, your maternal line. Still waiting for that to come up. Did it come up? It did. It did as a, okay. All right. So the mtDNA is your maternal line, and that is the DNA that is passed along from your mother, from mother to offspring. Y-DNA is the male DNA that is passed along from male child to male child. mtDNA, maternal to each offspring. Doesn't matter if it's male or female, but the Y chromosome is passed from father to son specifically. A woman cannot get a Y chromosome because it is a male chromosome. All right. So let us take a look at the haplogroups around the world, because your DNA could have come from anywhere in the world. I'm going to tie all of this into my past videos on my channel, and then follow up after that with other videos and podcasts. All right. So the Y chromosome, we begin with Europe. Europe has its haplogroups and markers. So does South Asia, North Asia, Indonesia, Middle East, the Caucasus Mountains, South Asia, East Asia, anywhere in Asia, Indonesia, I think I said it already, Middle East, Europe, Siberia, Pakistan, India, North Africa, West Asia, and I believe that is it. There's a video that will be coming out that discuss the haplogroups further. They're broken down for you, and then you'll be able to follow me. The mtDNA, which is your maternal genomes from your mother, and I have them in order on another video. I think am I still doing it? Okay, yep. So your haplogroups from your mother, from Europe, Middle East, Indiana, could be from North Africa, East Africa, West Africa, and I don't want to give out too much for the next video, but if you can take a chance, take some time and go over the haplogroups before that next video. Now, here where you see where it says first extinction event, that means that there was another world, and then that world was extinct, meaning all living life was wiped out. There's times where I think the Erasure or the Caucasus were wiped out on more than one extinction event. And as you can see here, so was Europe and the Middle East, more than one extinction event. You know that I'm definitely going to be tying in the Israelites. That's going to be down the line. Now, what else did I see? What else did I see? I'm going to take it back up. All right. Now, as you can see, you saw the haplogroups of the maternal and paternal lineage. Your maternal haplogroups and your paternal haplogroups are as described. African Americans, are as described. All right. But the African Americans today and the Amerindians in on and off the reservations. And might I add that reservations were created to house the incoming influx of Eskimos, Inuit, Siberians from Ukraine in the year of 1851. So please keep that in mind when reservations were created and built 1851. And remember that life existed before 1851, before the Siberians came, before the Europeans came. There was life in the Americas, which is not named America, before, and meaning pre-colonization. It is the Amerindian DNA, and that, well, many people, I believe, have been taught not to trust. Well, actually, let me back that back. Here's the reason why African Americans and Amerindians have been taught not to trust DNA genetic testing. The disclaimer here is, I have always felt this way, and my mother has felt this a certain way about going to get medical care. My mother probably went twice, well, let's say pregnancies, and another time for surgery. After that, as far as running to the doctor, she didn't do that. She believed in holistic. She was big bomb, but she believed in holistic. She did not believe in running to the doctor. That is because African Americans and Amerindians do not trust DNA genetic testing because of the attempts at eliminating the Amerindian, which is now the which is now the African Americans of the North and East Coast of the Americas. They attempted to eliminate them, and that is by war, both physically and mentally. And therefore, the alarm is that via paper, the African American's identity has been tampered with and has been well documented as having done so. Now, I will explain, but before I go there, let's jump to the Tower of Babel. Give me 1 second. I know some of y'all don't believe in the Bible. We know it's been rewritten, but if you're gonna tell us to believe in the Bible, then tell us to abide by it, because it says that the slave must respect or submit to the master. And then you want us to forget about Genesis. You want us to forget about the lineages that follow, because this is what this is all about. All we are doing is keeping genealogy and lineages going. The more we procreate, we are keeping some line going. Where does that line start? Genesis. All right. So am I a Bible thumper? Nope. I'm just trying to get you to see a point with the genealogy as we go along. Now, the Tower of Babel. Give me 1 second. I have to go back in. Give me a second. The Tower of Babel. And I don't know how many of you are aware of it. Did it pop on yet? Still waiting on it to pop on. There we go. Whether you think it's fictitious or not, you can't choose to pick what's in the Bible. You can't choose to say one day you're an Israelite or an Indian, which the Amerindian is the Israelite. You can't pick and choose what you want out of the Bible. Well, let's say, yes, you can, because we already know it's been tampered with. All right. But this fact here, I don't know how many of you believe it to be fictitious or not, but the Tower of Babel was taken from the scriptures of Genesis 11 and 1 through 9. I'm going to go ahead and read it, and then I'm going to get out of this and move forward. All right, Genesis 11 and 1 through 9, beginning with verse 1. Now the whole earth had one language and the same words. 2. And as they migrated from the east, they came upon a plain, in the land of Shinar and settled there. 3. And they said to one another, come, let us make bricks and fire them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. 4. Then they said, come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its tops in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves. Otherwise we shall be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. 5. The Lord came down to see the city and the tower which mortals had built. 6. And the Lord said, look, they are one people, and they have all one language. And this is only the beginning of what they will do. Nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. 7. Come, let us go down and confuse their language there, so that they will not understand one another's speech. 8. So the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city. 9. Therefore it was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the law, the language of all the earth. Babel means to squabble. I don't know if you all know that. It means a squabbling of the voice, or a language, or a tongue. The language of all the earth, and from there the Lord scattered them abroad. The Lord scattered them abroad. The Lord scattered them abroad. The Lord scattered them abroad over the face of all the earth. The Lord scattered them abroad over the face of all the earth. Genesis 11 and 1 through 9. Now, the reason why I read that is because how did we migrate from wherever Egypt is? Because again, I asked you all in my last video, how many of you have seen the word Africa, the country Africa, the continent Africa mentioned in the Bible? How many of us have seen it? I've never seen it. So wherever we migrated from and to, the purpose is Genesis 11, 1 through 9. Therefore, you got different tongues, and because of climate and environment, you have different skin tones and shades of tones, and then you have the mutations of cells, genomes, and phenomes. All right? Now, I just wanted to throw this in here. Give me 1 second. Don't make fun of my picture. I'm going to explain it in 1 second. I will explain it in 1 second. This picture. That's the wrong one. Give me a second. Give me a second. That's my next picture, though. Now, as I was locating the story about the about Babel, writing up my information, and to get it gathered together, Microsoft Word told me not to use Wikipedia, so I'm throwing this in here, and to find a source report about the Tower Babel, and I did. Here you go. For all you Bible thumpers, none teaching of the origins of who the Amerindians are and who the Israelites are. I cannot remember ever in Church of God in Christ. I don't want to step on no toes. Baptists, I love them. Baptist, Pentecost Church. I've never seen them discuss the Israelites, the lineage, meaning they're connecting the Genesis to bringing us forward. I've never seen them do it. Never seen them connect us to the Amerindian. We already know why they didn't do it. It has to do with grants. It has to do with fear, because the church was used when we were invaded. The church was used as a place of gathering and meeting, spread of information, much like the smartphone. And at any moment, actually safe haven as well, but at any moment that could be burned to the ground and destroyed. So that we know why they feared that information about the Amerindian and the connection of the Israelites as well. Am I an Israelite by blood lineage? Yes. Amerindian by blood lineage? Yes. But by practicing the actual, let's say, quote unquote, well, quote, Israelites, unquote, I have not done that. It's already in our blood. All right, so I just wanted to also throw in there that the Holy Ghost, and I'm telling you, I am not trying to go here, but I have to bring you forward. And the Holy Ghost of the Church of God in Christ is that of the spiritual connection of the Amerindians and the Indigenous. How do I know this? I looked this up at least 5 years ago, and it verified that. This page here I'm using about the Tower of Babel. Just wanted you to see that it does exist. Can you see it? Over there to the right. That person is an archaeologist who stood at the base of the Tower of Babel. Don't know where it's at. I don't know if it is in America or not. I have no idea. But in the Babylon, I believe is America. Through my research in, I think it was 2006, I came to the terms that America was Babylon. That's pre-TikTok. All right, so moving forward, let me finish up here about the Tower of Babel. Take you back into here. All right. Now, that dispatchment of people around the world, around the earth, it is this dispatchment that places people again all around the world. And the lineage of Genesis is somewhere in this world. Do any of you understand that this is documented? It was documented to keep power, control over the land, and control over the descendants of the Amerindians, who did what? They owned the land of the North and East Coast prior to the colonizations or the colonization by the British, and prior to the settler or the settling of nearly every royal or convict, indentured servant, and immigrant who arrived shortly to this land and who has or who were granted and inherited from stolen land. And this is a fact via treaties and documentation and oral reports of the today African Americans, who are the Amerindians of the North and East Coast, with the stories, the oral reports that they had acres and acres of lands and they were stolen, and the atrocities of that land being stolen. If you haven't had a chance to take a look at my videos regarding review of Illinois land patents and land treaties forced upon the Amerindians of the now state of Illinois, I will, you can go ahead and look at those videos. Now, I will attempt to establish a timeline of the British, Spanish, and Portuguese timelines of Indian land invasion of the now Amerindians. Give me 1 second. All right, via the Library of Congress. So I'm going to bump this up from Wikipedia because Wikipedia you can utilize, but all you have to do is just take what's in Wikipedia and research a little bit further to verify the information that is at Wikipedia. All right, there we go, waiting for it to come up. All right, I don't know why it's half showing, but I will do this. Okay, so the timeline, let's get with this timeline. The London Company sent out its first expedition to begin colonizing Virginia on December 20th, 1606. It is stated by the Library of Congress, as you can see here. And that quote, "It was by no means the first European attempt to explore North America," unquote. And this is December 1606. That means that although they were successful at colonizing in 1606, but prior to there were other attempts. And I read in the past 7-8 years that there was more than one attempt. The conditions were so bad. The expedition was not only a failed expedition, but it originally was Christopher Columbus being lost. And then when he did land, he came, well, actually, it was stated that Leif Erikson, Erikson, was one of the first explorers. But for some reason, they're sticking with Christopher Columbus as being the first to land here. But with Christopher Columbus, he had more than one attempt. He went back, actually tried to do some fighting. It didn't work out. His men were taken, captured, and killed. So he left. He was able to go back to London or to the British royalty to get more boats to come over and more, of course, weapons and manpower. So that is why he had more than one attempts. And then those attempts, with the help of backstabbing and utilizing tribes against tribes, is how he actually basically was able to take over. But again, that quote is quoted by the Library of Congress, that it was by no means the first European attempt to exploit North America. All right. The arrival of the first captives to the Jamestown colony in 1619 is often seen as the beginning of slavery in America. But enslaved Africans arrived in North America as early as the 1500s. So right there, they're letting you know that during the 1500s, Africans came, but they more than likely came as indentured servants or the Moors or other dark-skinned or Africans assisting. Remember, there were a lot of pirates assisting with the voyage with the Europeans. Also, at the time of arrival, now remember the timeline, 1500s, 1600s, who existed prior to that time? All right. The English established a foothold at Jamestown, 1606 through 1610. Would-be colonists arrived in Chesapeake Bay from England in April 1607. On board were 105 men, 40 soldiers, and 35 gentlemen. Your gentlemen are your royalty. The royalty could have been just from British alone, but in my tree, some of them was on that voyage, and I know some settlers that are within my tree, but they wasn't all of the the royalty were not only just from Britain. You had Scottish royalty, you had German royalty, and you had royalty from other countries as well. There was also various artisans and laborers. Let's get into the evolution of the Virginia colony in 1611 through 1624. Almost from the start, investors in the Virginia Company in England were unhappy with the accomplishments of their Jamestown colonists. These are people that put money in, and you better believe it was your kingdoms of royalty, specifically British royalty. They therefore sought a new charter, which the king granted in May 1609. This is your Library of Congress. All right. Next, Virginia's early relations with Native Americans. I have seen censuses where I have ancestors that were mentioned as Native, let's say ethnicity as Native Americans. I went back probably 2 years later, knowing what I seen them change it to Indian, and from Indian to Black. I've seen that happen personally, right? So pay attention to those censuses that you go in, purchase and save, print screen everything, try to print everything. If you got to roll your camera and let a screen roll to get the documents you need, you have to do that as well, because after a while, they're going to figure out that, you know, once they already decrease the price of the genetic testing to affordable cost, everybody is now swarming to it. They have to be in tune with the lie, and the percentages have to match the lie. Okay, so after a while, these documents, are they going to be, you know, within their possession, and the company has been sold, at least Ancestry has been sold. There's a couple other ones, I'm not for certain, have been sold. And what is the purpose of presenting yourself to a company and saying, oh, I want to buy the genetic companies? That's to control the percentages of the ethnicity. The ethnicities control the treaties and the land controls the wealth and the power. Simple. All right. The Virginia's early relations with Native Americans. The Native Americans, strike that out, marry Indians. We're talking about the northeast coast. Virginia is not the Lakotas. They are not on the south coast. They're not on the southeast or the southwest coast. They're not on the northwest coast. The Virginias, North Carolina, Georgia, Mississippi, Florida. Who is that? Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, Tennessee, Alabama, Indiana, Illinois. That is not your southwest coast. I don't even see how anyone like the Native Americans, who are definitely mixed with the European, mixed with Siberian Asians, could be arguing about states that they didn't live in and wasn't born in. Right? Virginia's early relations with Native Americans. Those living in the area where Jamestown was settled must have had mixed feelings, just like they had mixed DNA about the arrival of the English in 1607. One of their first reactions was hostility based on their previous experience with Spanish explorers along their coastline. The reason why I'm mentioning that. Via 1609 through 1890s, there were wars. Those wars included the United States going into Alaska, Canada, and Mexico. So 1609 through 1890, they decided that they wanted to take over. That means after those 3 or 4 failed attempts and finally getting some help, some military playing the natives against the Indians against each other, that the wars lasted that long, they were soon able to take over that north and southeast coast. My ancestors are from the Indian territories of the Powhatan, Shawnee, Pamunkey, Muskogee Creek, Nansemond, Cherokee, Choctaw, Tuscaroras, and the Lumbee tribes. This is only a few of them. And through war and treaties, death and survival, and the existence of laws that contain the now classified, the now reclassified African Americans as prisoners of wars via mass incarceration, laws and brutality, redlining, stereotypes, Jim Crow laws, and the Jim Crow laws, I think I mentioned that, were written by a branch in my Benford family lineage. This is not a guess. This is not, I think, I already know and verified. That same surname was erroneously changed to, actually from Binford to Benford, Benford. The Benford line is one of the three brothers that came from Ireland or Wales. Do not quote me on that yet, because I'll get into that later. But there were three brothers, the Benford brothers, that originally landed in Virginia. They were the original settlers of Virginia. And you do know that they erroneously will change a letter in the name to throw you off, to separate you from the original carrying of that surname, to set you apart from any atrocities. They would throw in an E, throw in an I, take away parts of your name, and that would be the Binford could be for, surname could be for the clear or the white Ural lineage, and then the Benford for the brown ones in the family. And let me note that throughout my genealogy, which means the study of lineage, family trees, and pedigrees, you will see intentional name changes, ethnicities, changes in race, documentation, and identity changes. So be prepared, not shocked, but be prepared, because what you do with the truth is very important to your descendants and the next generations to come. So with that, I hope that, as I have been assigned to do by my ancestors, and that is to find the truth no matter what I find, and the good and the bad of the ethnicities within my family tree, and I hope you are able to do the same. Now, I will swiftly move you from the wars and what happened during and after the land theft that took place. And you know that there were wars between 1606 through the 1800s, I think into 1899. And when I think about it, when I think about the treatment and the mass incarceration of the Amerindians and Africans born and raised here, there were Africans that came in, there were Amerindians that went out, okay? There's no doubt about that. We can't get around that. We can't even get around the admixture of having European blood. But they'll give us that European blood, but they won't give us that Amerindian blood. They'll give us the European blood and say we can claim that, but they won't allow us to claim the Caribbean blood or the indigenous blood across the world. Right? So you have to know who you are to be able to claim all of what you are supposed to claim. All right? We know that the mass incarceration of the Amerindians and Africans born and raised here in the Americas, nearly all who are now admixed to some degree. It makes me sad just to think about it. I'm going to tell you that now. And those who know my conversations throughout my lifetime know I speak about those traps, not getting falling into the traps of drugs, alcohol, fall into the traps of uh, getting locked up, because it was a trap. It was a visual trap. You just had to be focused. And sometimes some people were focused and they still fell in the trap with even just 3 strikes. So it was a maneuvering. It definitely was a maneuvering. Okay, I will now share pieces to why they are locked up. And that is to keep the ability to be powerful and to assist in the family any way they could, and to shut that down. And they do so with the atrocities that they did to our ancestors and the laws that they wrote. Just think about the atrocities that our ancestors went through to defend the land and their existence and our existence. So, for not one moment do you forget that these things happen. No matter how many basketball scholarships they give you, car ownership, jobs, degrees, houses, bank accounts, that's only a small percentage compared to the overall population and what they themselves own. Because there's a huge salary and wage and income gap. And the fact that it is our ancestors' land that we now have to pay for and to get and to keep. All right. Don't forget to like and subscribe for me. Like and subscribe to the channel. Well, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you. Thank you. Now, are you familiar with Michael Plecker? Moving along. Are you familiar with Michael Plecker? Some of you may already be familiar with them. I'm trying to pull my picture up. I'm going to tell you because something popped in my eye before. And I have been sitting here all this time. Nothing was going on with my eye. Okay, where my picture at? I'm still waiting on that picture. All right, give me a second. I'm trying to get this picture that I have already here ready. Evidently I don't, so I have to go another route with it. It's here, but for some reason. Everyone, I believe, know who he is, but for those of you who don't, it's crazy. They will not allow me to bring him up again. Michael Plecker. Unbelievable. I'm looking at the picture. So it's not that. I'm trying to figure out why I can't bring this up. I don't know why. All right. And I just tried to Google him, which I already did, and they won't let me bring him back up. Thing is, don't panic. Give me a second. I don't believe this. And it's a nice picture too. I actually really want you guys to see this picture. And I just Googled them trying to bring it back up. They give me every picture and every story on other Michael Pleckers than him. I don't get that. I'm not misspelling the name wrong or incorrectly. They do not want me to show you who this man is. And even though I know you all know. Unbelievable. Let's try this one. Yes, they did do that. But gotta keep on going. All right, here we go. Michael Plecker. I guess that's it. All right, they kind of blocking this. I never had this happen. Yes, they did pull this. Okay, let's see if it's coming up. You won't even let it come up. Oh, wait. All right, that blows my picture from Michael Plecker. I'm going to keep this going. All right. This is wild. I'm still going to keep trying because this is not for to stop me. Give me 1 second. All right. You already know. A lot of people already know how this look. I'm gonna blow this up some because they like really tripping on this. This is he down here to the right. Black and white picture here. That's crazy. Let's see. All right. Anyway, this article is written by the Washington Post. I did not use this article, but I had this picture cropped and already set to go. I have it up. It will not allow me to pull it up. I do not know what's going on. All right. So that's Michael Plecker here in this black and white picture at his desk, deemed by the Washington Post in this article here that he is a white supremacist. Okay. He actually kind of steered, not kind of, but he changed everything for the African American. And actually, I wanted to let you know that I didn't learn about Michael Plecker during social media or via social media. I did learn it in the past decades as a child, taught by my grammar school teacher. I already knew, and I was studying all of this stuff, looking at documentaries, National Geographic, reading newspapers, APA, ICD-9s, all of that. I was already doing that. And as you can see, I actually grew up with encyclopedias. I don't have that picture that's encyclopedia. But I did want to share with you what I do have. And as you can see on this picture that is about to pop up, this is a picture of my mom bent over, who is my ancestor, my only sibling, who passed away after both my parents passed away on the same day, same second. He gave up. So these actually, they're gone. But in the center of my mom and my brother, you will see that in 1983, I had my mom bought us a computer, which is called Microsoft PC. Microsoft PC means personal computer. So if I tell you that I've been doing stuff for a very long time, but this particular computer, it actually, we had 2 sets of encyclopedias in our house. And again, by 1983, I owned my own Microsoft PC, and it actually required DOS, DOS, meaning it did not have Windows yet. So, you know, Microsoft Word, all of that, and there were no browsers or operating systems. And this is what I had. So my mom was ahead of her time a long, long time ago. A long time ago. She was ahead of her time, and I thank God for her for not wanting to work in an office, but she loved working with electronics. She built her own computers, and she only had an 8th grade education. And to her rest in peace, I will get back into the business of doing this research for y'all. But that was proof that I did own a computer in 1983. Now, Michael Plecker, known as Walter Ashby Plecker, was a physician, and he was the first Virginia state registrar of vital statistics. And in earlier videos of mine with the My History Verified channel, you will see that I got into what vital statistics are, where they are kept. They are called the censuses that happen every 10 years. Michael Plecker was in charge of the censuses. He served in this position from 1912 to 1946. So imagine, you might as well get in tune with this, because he is a descendant of colonizers who came and killed off the Amerindians and then began writing documents, creating documents to preserve the control of the land and the power, but they also was able to rewrite history based on censuses alone, race and ethnicity, and what goes on the censuses alone. And remember, I already told you that the censuses are important. And not next year's, but the 2030 census was important, and you just don't realize that actually the 2020 censuses was more importantly. If you pay attention, you'll see a lot going on, a lot of immigrants coming in now, and it always has to do with land and power. All right, now let me get into the meat of the discussion of the reclassification of the Amerindian for the purpose of genomes, family trees, haplogroups, lineages, genesis, and the changing of documents to steal land and power and keep land and power. Now, I am confused. Well, maybe not. Why so many educated folks talking about they are directors of Africana studies or Black and African phenomes, or that they do not speak about these findings that we are finding on a daily basis. Why they don't speak about them and, you know, argue them at court? after finding all of that during their readings and their studies, why haven't any Black lawyers and doctors said anything? Now that's a whole nother thing. We already know what happens. You get into all of that. But I just want to know personally. Now remember that these colonizers and settlers went to nearly every island in this world and killed, impregnated, and attempted to enslave those, including their own blood, after creating admixed children or mulattoes, claiming them based on their emotions and feelings and attachments, or claiming them based on skin color, race, meaning skin color. Because there are dark mixed kids by the colonizer or the European that were not claimed, that were not sheltered, right? Whether it's by an Amerindian, which was the same shade of color as the African that was brought over, or the indigenous from Australia, or the indigenous from Asia, or the indigenous from all the islands south of us. So I want you to join me on another live, another time, regarding ventures into the islands where indigenous were already there and where many people of color and the indigenous were taken. Let me continue by doing so with this reading. All right, I am going to get into the reading of something. What Michael Plecker did. Did I get into that? Oh, Michael Plecker. What Michael Plecker did. Michael Plecker, again, was the keeper of vital statistics. He went in and changed, what is that? He went in and changed the laws, beginning in Virginia, and he tried to convince the other colonies, well, not the colonies, the other states that were already formed as the United States, tried to convince them to change anyone that said that they were a Amerindian, change all documents and say that they were, remember that reclassification I told you, from Amerindian to Negro to color to Black, mulatto, Afro-American, Black American, and now African American. That's what he did. If you do not believe it, you have the Library of Congress. You have his, actually, I have his, actual letter that he wrote. I will have it in 1 second. So if you do not believe it, then that means that you don't care to know the truth. Because all it takes is a simple, where is that at? All it takes is simple research. Where is all the photocopy? I prepared all of this. Give me a second. I'm gonna go in, back in and get the letter. I have it and print it up for you. But he wrote he actually wrote the government first. And then he wrote the different states, the governors of each state, demanding, trying to convince them to write off the African American. All right, so there you have the letter. I actually had it out. The letter from Walter Plecker regarding surnames by counties and cities of mixed Negroid Virginia families. He started this push in Virginia and then began to try to convince other states to commit paper genocide, and they did, against the Indians, those that were able to pass as Indians. And of course, he's going to say pass. That gives you the indication that anyone that looked like an Indian or Negroid, as they say, that lets you know that they had the same phenoms. As you can see, it says of mixed Negroid Virginia families striving to pass as Indian or white. Now, how do you get away with passing as Indian and being up with Negroid phenoms and being able to pass as white as well? Passing, that means if you're saying that Negroes are black, look like monkeys, how would they be able to pass as an Indian or a white person? You have to get at doubt. Please step outside your box. All right? He wrote this in 1943. Let me blow this up for you. This is how the letter look. Hand typed. Actual letter. All right? It says Commonwealth of Virginia, Department of Health, Bureau of Vital Statistics, Richmond, Virginia, December 1943, to local registrars, clerks, legislators, and other responsible for and interested in the prevention of racial intermixture. Did not want the races to mix. He already know they had been mixed. In 1943, he knew that the Europeans had impregnated both the Indian and the African. The Indian and the African had the same phenome types. They also admixed as well. And he had already known, it was documented, and it was proof around the world that those races had already admixed. He was trying to stop the claiming of being Indian in America. There is ties to the land of America, and the ties to European would force the European colonizer to have to admit to having one stolen land, two impregnated and left children behind. So his plan was to stop all of that. Remember, he's coming from a colonizer. He's coming from the original state that did the colonizing and that is Virginia. All right. In our January 1943 annual letter, we're going to continue to local registrars and clerks of courts with lists of mixed surnames. And we've been over surnames. We called attention to the greatly increased effort and arrogant demands now being made for classification as whites, or at least for recognition as Indians, as a preliminary step to admission into the white race by marriage of groups of the descendants of the free Negroes. No designation before 1865 to distinguish them from slavery or being slaves. And you know he's lying as he's going along. According to Wendell's law of heredity, 1 out of 4 of a family of mixed breeds through the introduction of illegitimate white blood is now so I don't know what that is. neuromission into white schools. Forbidden by the state constitution. The other three find it more difficult to make the grade, that means that they are darker than the ones that are able to go to the white schools and say that they are white. He knows that there are European mixed persons doing at that time that are of different shades, different skin colors. As a climax of their ambition, colored people of this type are applying for licenses to carry or to marry whites, or for white licenses when intermarrying amongst themselves. These they frequently secure with ease when they apply to a county or city not the home of the woman, and are met by a clerk or a deputy who justifies himself in accepting a casual affidavit as the truth and in issuing a license to any applicant regardless of the requirements of section 5099S, paragraph 4 of the code. This section places the proof upon the applicants, not upon the clerks. We have learned that affidavits cannot always be accepted as truth. This loose practice, to state it mildly, of a few clerks is now the greatest obstacle in the way of the proper registration by race required of the state registrar of vital statistics in that section. Local registrars, who are supposed to know the people of their registration areas, of course, have no excuse for not matching or not catching false registration of births and deaths. He has some real hate. And remember, the Washington Post article stated he was white supremacist. It means he believes in a white nation, even though they're on stolen land and is people of color land. Let me continue. And in many cases, Negroes have white marriage certificates, while the Bureau demands correct legal registration as to race when their children's birth are reported. Armed with the clerk's marriage certificate, they leave home and easily pass as white. And guess what? If you say that Black people have monkey features and they're Black and whatever, and if somebody's able to pass for white, don't you think they mixed? He's just trying to deny it altogether. And in those rights, in those documents, in those birth certificates, in those censuses, is power. With the birth certificate, with the pedigree on the back, is not required. They are even threatening legal action against the state registrar, but have difficulty in securing a lawyer if he first applies to the Bureau of Vital Statistics for the facts. Today, we have difficulty securing a lawyer. I don't care what the subject is. When I read stuff like this, it just validates a whole lot of stuff. And just like we're reading, they're reading too. And they can just continue on. And some Black Black professionals do so as well. They just continue on with mess, and they don't even try to do what's right. All right. In many cases, Negroes have white marriage certificates, while the Bureau demands correct legal registration as to race when their children's births are reported. The Virginia Bureau of Vital Statistics, through the exceptional, painstaking, and laborious work of the highly trained genealogists, whom it is fortunate in having, has made a study by groups and families of the principal borderline aspirants for racial change. The chief sources of information are the early birth and death records made by the tax assessors from 1853 to 1896, marriage records from 1853 to date, United States Census reports for 1830, 1850, and 1870, especially a printed list of free Negroes by countries from the 1830 census, county taxpayer lists by races, now in the state library, which have been studied back to 1808, and not of least value. Their own proclamation of race made by applicants for states military, made by applicants for registration and voters made soon after the war between the states to United States military authorities, now preserved in the state library. The progenitors of the present would be white, then marched up voluntarily and registered for the first time in the life of their race in Virginia as Negro voters, not as Indians, not as whites. That lets you know that the Indians are what they call the Negroes and reclassified to the African American. And this is for all of those races out there. And you don't even have to be European to be racist. You have Asian races. You have Siberian races, here in America especially. You have France races. You have India, from India, races. People that don't want to believe the truth and accept the truth because it holds power in demeaning other people, and particularly the African Americans. We are rich in so many ways, not even just with the land. We are rich in so many ways that even the entire world has been taught to hate us. But if they just would dig deep, and if they would just read, if they would take the time to put hate aside and not only just read, but accept what they read and what they learn and what someone directs them to, where would we be? Different dimensions for sure. I'll continue the reading. Public records in the Office of the Bureau of Vital Statistics and in the State Library indicate that there does not exist today a descendant of Virginia ancestors claiming to be an Indian who is unmixed with Negro blood. I'm going to repeat that again. Public records in the Office of the Bureau of Vital Statistics and in the State Library indicate that there does not exist today a descendant of Virginia ancestors claiming to be an Indian who is unmixed with Negro blood. Since your more complete investigation of all these records and the statements, mostly signed, of numerous trustworthy old citizens, many now dead, all preserved in our racial integrity files. That's something you can look up as well. What are the racial integrity files? No one has attempted by early recorded evidence to disapprove this finding. If they tried to disapprove it, what do you think happened to them? This is 1943. What do you think has happened, would have, and what has happened along the way? Those lynchings weren't of Africans. Those were lynchings of Amerindians. Amerindians who, even if they tried to conform and abide by the assimilation or spoke up for themselves, they were deemed uppity, difficult, or anything else they said, and killed. That's just what they did. I think you guys should take a look at this letter. This one is at mixedracestudies.org regarding the Michael Plecker letter. It just says a whole lot. It says a lot what we are even saying today. in his letter, he said no one has tried to disapprove what he said, even though they know that there are Indians that wrote letters, Indian chiefs during those wars of fighting before 1943, wrote letters begging for their families and tribes to not be killed off. I have those in my tree as well. Those very same records I'm speaking of. All right, so continue. In such evidence exists, if he wrote, if such evidence exists, our research worker would have found it. Apparently she didn't, and apparently they tried to hide it because the agents who were, well, the agents who left the records in the hands of their descendants, of the Church of Latter-day Saints, have released all those records. So the records exist. The Library of Congress has the records. The records are being found in people's homes. They're in wills. The records exist. There was no one or they didn't record someone who did disapprove of the records. So one weak point, which is giving an endless trouble, is the fact that many birth certificates since 1912 have, without realization of future danger, being accepted with false registration as Indian. What could be a danger if they're killing off Indians? What could be the danger in claiming Indian? What's the danger other than death? What's the danger? Could it be passing along the ethnicity of Indian or the race of Indian to the current generation, or what they can do with it? Do you get where I'm trying to go? Continue. Not a few, and I'm gonna read that again. One weak point, weak point, which is giving us endless trouble, is the fact that many birth certificates since 1912 have, without realization of future danger, been accepted with false registration as Indian. Now, not a few, when we're off our guard, have slipped by as white. So that means even if they were white, they was mixed, they stopped all of that. The General Assembly should empower us to state the recorded pedigree on the blacks or the backs of such certificates and transcripts to protect those desiring the truth now and in the future. This is a typed letter from Plecker, a medical doctor and recorder of vital statistics of birth certificates, death certificates, censuses, stating that no one should be called an Indian. It would be trouble if they did. And if anyone in the future desired the truth, they would not be able to prove it. Please think about that. Pass this along. The letter is here. His signature is there. On the letter. Please pass it along. I clicked that. I don't know what happened. Let me get it back up there. I don't even think this was the one I was on. Please, please share this letter with those you know. There's his signature. Michael Plecker. One weak point which is giving us endless trouble is the fact that many birth certificates, the proof is in the birth certificates, people. The proof is in the death certificates. The reclassification of the Amerindian, the deemed blacks and now African Americans, is via this direct order to every vital statistic or medical doctor, anyone who has the ability to document legally with their court systems, with their government agencies, the race and ethnicity henceforward from 1943 on. One of the most powerful letters that you'll be able to read, and one that I have read in my lifetime. Some of this gets really painful. I don't understand what anybody else could possibly need. I don't get what anybody else could possibly need to understand and have proof that this is what it is. All right, I'm going to go into another reading of another document, and it will be tying in the Israelites and the Amerindian. And I will do so with this book. All right, there's 400 pages, so it has to catch up with the page. This is how the book look. It is in PDF form. And remember, they didn't care about enslaving anybody. They enslaved, those including their own blood. Right? All right, so this book is called The History of Ancient America. Before we start, I'm going to go ahead and take a break. Give you a chance to get some water. I'm going to get some water or something. All right, welcome back. Don't forget to join me on another live regarding ventures into the islands where indigenous people were already there and where many people of color, meaning indigenous, were taken. That means transatlantic slave, and the Amerindians became prisoners of wars and were enslaved. They went out to other islands, and they also went to other countries, especially British and London. Well, London was around them, but to the British. All right. Let me continue by reading this. And this book actually is called The History of Ancient America, the anterior to the time of Columbus, proving the identity of the Aboriginals with the Turians and Israelites, and the introduction of Christianity of the Western Hemisphere by the Apostle Saint Thomas. Now, some of you only believe what you want to believe, and then some of you non-people of color, and a lot of you people are color too. I know a lot of other races that deny a lot of stuff that the Amerindian says. But it oh, why I can't do this? Give me a second. Okay, so it actually is the again, the history of ancient America, interior of the time of Columbus, proving the identity of the Aboriginals. This was a book written and documented and stored in both England and the Americas. And I'll begin reading. This gets kind of finicky because of the number of pages. The American history of the time of Columbus. It's going to tie in when he first arrived, what he saw, the tying in of the Israelites. The Israelites begin with Genesis, and then the introduction of Christianity. And I don't know if any of you all know, well, the introduction of Christianity into the Western Hemisphere. And I am not sure if any of you know that Christianity actually started, let's see, I think like Islam started in the 1600 after Christ. That is after the crucifixion of the Messiah. The Roman Catholics created Christianity, even though Christianity is the birth, the life, the resurrection of the Messiah. After they crucified him, the Romans came up with, they actually continued to torture, or they tortured any of his believers, those that witnessed the actual the resurrection, and anyone that passed along any of his actual teachings, witnessing to his miracles, and then the resurrection. And so it is stated that the Roman Catholic used Christianity to gain his followers after that, and thus the rest is world history. All right, beginning with this. I don't see the year in which it was written. The dedication to His Grace, the Archbishop of Canterbury. Your Grace. Dedications mean that the person specifically wrote that dedication to someone that they are dedicating the book to. And in this case, he dedicated the book to the Archbishop. The inscription of the first volume: to His Majesty Frederick William of the Fourth King of Prussia, Your Majesty, with feelings of enthusiasm, founded on the contemplation of a peaceful and a patriotic king, do I inscribe to Your Majesty the first volume of an effort to delineate the history of ancient America. If in the following pages Your Majesty should recognize your own portrait and that of Hiram the Great, it is such as truth and history have designed and colored. Phony flattery and false adulteration have not added even a thought of embellish where patriotism has so nobly consolidated. The building of Solomon's temple at Jerusalem by Hiram Tyrus was not more generous and liberal in religious sentiments than were your own. As Protestant King of Prussia and land the cornerstone of the Catholic Cathedral of Cologne, the fervent words at which ceremony time will hallow with his archives, nor was your own branch of Christianity forgotten or neglected. For the sacred city of Jerusalem previously recorded Your Majesty's munificence in promulgating the divine faith of salvation, for the peace of Europe, and for the prosperity of Prussia, for the advancement of religious and civil liberties, education, literature, the arts, and science, may the disposal of events prolong the life and intellectual vigor of Your Majesty to the utmost verge of vulnerable age, and when the monument shall enclose your earthly remains, may your subjects feel that your royal ancestor, Frederick of Prussia, was not the only monarch of their fatherland deserving the land-honored and historic surname of the Great. Everything is connected to ancestors, everything is connected to lineage. They have always wanted the African Americans not to remember their lineage, but to only remember the demeaning things, the torture, the negativity, the laws of constraint and restraint, forced assimilation that they want us to abide by. I will continue. I am flattered in the occasion which permits me to render this tributary offering and to subscribe myself, Your Majesty's obedient, obliged, George Jones, written in London in June of 1843. So we are far, far away from even the civil wars of America actually the 13 colonies trying to get America to end slavery, because at a certain point, the British withdrew and created a company just to be only involved in not the selling of bodies, but the transmitting on that triangle of goods and services. So they hid their actual deeds on their incorporated business with just the transporting of the goods, and that would include humans. So they in their minds, we're not involved in slavery. We abolished it, but we will transport them. Right. So in order to transport them, the person paying for those trips would probably say that they're sending the person to take care of a cousin. They'll say those type of things to kind of steer away from them actually being enslaved. Right. Let's continue. No, I can't. I think this is the preface. The preface to the deep historic interests expressed by His Royal Highness the Duke of Cambridge concerning the Aborigines of America may be traced the production of this work. It led the author originally to write the Israeli Indian tragedy of Tecumseh, illustrative of the patriotic race of the North. Tecumseh is an Indian who fought in wars. He was a Muskogee Creek warrior, and which composition has received the honor of being dedicated to the illustrious prince by special permission. The publication has been delayed only from the fact that it would anticipate this branch of the present work and might consequently be injurious. The investigations necessary for writing of North America called into action the study and observation of years in relation to South America, and in contemplating the newly discovered ruined cities and temples upon the moiety of the Western continent. I don't know why this is so finicky, but the very spirit of the romance of truth seemed to find a voice in every sculptured altar, column, stone, or pyramid. And when upon the enthusiastic pursuit of hidden knowledge, the sudden discovery of every Christianity and its sacred promulgator were identified with the Western Hemisphere. The connection to the Christianity that they're talking about is the Israelites, and who the Israelites are, which is the African Americans, the Amerindians. As you can see, said every drop of that, the truth was in the sculptures and the altars, the columns and the stones, and even the pyramids. And when upon the enthusiastic pursuit of hidden knowledge, the sudden discovery of early Christianity and its sacred promulgator were identified with the Western Hemisphere. Sanctioned as is the discovery by Holy Writ, history, tradition, customs, and the oracular this is real finicky, and the oracular sculptures of antiquity. Language has no power to express the bounding feelings of the heart when that original vision of the mind became apparent as the stern reality of historic truth. Knowing from experience that works upon antiquities described in language cold as the marbles they illustrate are not of deep interest to the general reader, The author has therefore avoided the usual frigid style and has consequently placed around them such fervent and glowing words as their novel characters have authorized and demanded. In delineating also the history of tyrants, the chief's events only are given and being rendered with the artistical pages commemorate the poetry of history, and not its dry prosaic qualities will be received by the reader. This will be seen in the descriptions of the classic remains, battles, and voyages, and especially, for instance, in resuscitating the ruins of Rome and in the celebrated. Now, what could they be celebrating? The fact that they were able to come to America and continue to wreak havoc on the Israelites. Tyrion's Siege by Alexander of Macedon, but in this style of writing, it is submitted. The author has not lost sight of that high solemnity demanded by the philosophy of history, without which memorials of the past ages of our fathers would be useless. To give a list of works consulted during 15 years in America, and that is from 1843, and you take 15 years away, and more immediately for the last 2 years in England, while writing the Tyrian era would be pedantic, but no author, sacred or profane, from the first lawgiver to the present time, having even a remote reference to the Western Hemisphere, has been knowingly omitted. Yet being professedly an original work, the volume of the brain has been more largely extracted from than any writer whose works are already before that public, to whose final judgment upon its merits or demerits, the present author submits the first history of ancient America with all humility, but he will yield to none in the consensuous belief in the truth of the startling propositions and the consequent historic conclusions, and that the reader may not imagine that any undue motive dictated to the writer the publication of this work, the following extract from the Messrs. Longman's letter upon their own and their reader's investigation of this volume will justify him. We have fully considered the publication of your work on America. It is undoubtedly a work of great ingenuity and originality, and should it be considered that your conclusions are correct, it will be a work to confer on its author a high rank in literature. We shall be happy to be your publishers. The usual table of contents has been avoided in order to prevent anticipation of the subject matter and sequence of the history, but at the same time, for after reference, a copious index has been placed at the end of the volume. The author, London, June, 1843. Notice to booksellers, proprietors of circulating libraries, and the public. This is to give notice that the original history of ancient America, of which this is the first volume, is copyright and legally secured by the proprietor both in England and America. The penalties, therefore, any infringement will be enforced by the publishers according to the new Act of Parliament and the Acts of Congress of the United States. By the former especially as applied to England and her colonies, any person having in his possession for sale or for hire any foreign editions, any person having in his possession for sale or hire any foreign edition of any English copy is liable to a heavy penalty, and any copy found in the possession of a traveler from abroad will be forfeited. They had a lot of nerves. The Tyrian era. Tyrian. Original History of Ancient America, book the first, chapter 1, introduction from the preface to the author's historical work upon the life of Tecumseh, named to be used for South or Central America, the fundamental era of the historians of America, essential opposites and caricature, rules of argument for illustrating the theory, a sufficient identity of the North to prove two distinct people, the Aboriginals wrongfully named Indians by Columbus, the cause of his era and its effects. In the prefatory remarks to the forthcoming work upon the chieftain Tecumseh, the following language is used, and we avail ourselves of the privilege of extracting from our own storehouse materials for the commencement of his new historical campaign. Quote, the courteous reader, in tracing the fate of Tecumseh as depicted in the pages of his life, will not fail to observe the strong analogy between the religious sentiments of the chief of the forest and those of the ancient Hebrews. That means that Tecumseh practiced Hebrew, wrote in Hebrew, fought the same way. The art, the culture was Hebrewic. So Tecumseh, a Muskogee Creek. My bloodline is Muskogee Creek, maternal, as told to me by my grandmother that we were Igbo. The Igbos are Hebrews. Her line on her mother's side does not have any Africans. And her grand nephew today, who is over 70 years old, says that we are Hebrew Israelites. I'm reading this chapter for the first time. I read the preface in the past, and it was enough to know what the author was trying to exemplify. And here I am reading this and sharing this for the first time with you. I hope that you are able to get this PDF. It is free. It is over 492 pages, and I will continue. He's drawn a correlation between Tecumseh, the Muskogee Creek chief or warrior, to the ancient Hebrews, everything that he's done. The language as uttered by Tecumseh is not written by the pen of fiction merely to uphold a theory of the brain, but gathered from the archives of a people's history to support a theory of apparent truth. The present writer will not yield to any man in the firm belief that the Aboriginals of North America, but North America only, and the ancient Israelites are identical, unless controverted by the stern authority of superior historical dedications. We therefore have formed an original theory in reference to the natives of the North and those of South and Central America, together with the newly discovered ruined cities in and around Guatemala, and by that theory have separated into two distinct races or people, the Aborigines of the Western Hemisphere. I'm going to let you all think about that. Quote, the lately recovered ruins, cities, and temples in Central America, and of which no ancient record is to be found, have shattered the chain of acknowledged history of atoms, and until that chain is again united by a firmly established theory, education herself must pause ere she can, with the rand of truth pointing to her rising children, the history of the world or its inhabitants. Suspicion has asserted that all the natives of the continent of Columbus might probably have been originally of Hebrew extraction. The assertion has been made in doubt and trembling, for writers have been confounded by essential contrast in the religious customs of North and South America. There were no analogies between them, which circumstance should have compelled historians to pursue another path of inquiry and so attain a conclusive truth. But they found a Gordian knot which they could not unravel, and assuming the impatient weapon of Alexander, they destroyed it. The architecture, however, in the ruins of Copan, Palanque, Uxmal, and their time-honored associates have furnished a Rosetta Stone to aid the new translation of the hieroglyphical history of now ancient America. And if our theory is true, not only have the Israelites walked the land where the sun bestows his last smile, but another nation in which was retained the primitive language of the Diluvian world, previously trod that soil as aboriginals, and beyond all this. If our thread of Ariadne led us faithfully, if not the Almighty Father who gave the thought, will pardon its application, yes, beyond all the bounding feelings, leaping at events at once classic and venerated, do we contemplate another branch of our theory. For if we do not write in error, and our perfect faith assures us that we do not, then the trembling hand which sought in doubt the Savior's wounds has been outstretched in sacred oratory, even in these southern wilds, the bold yet conquered voice which uttered in hallowed and confirmed faith, my Lord and my God, has given forth this mentioned eloquence even in the Western Hemisphere, and there the sainted ashes of that apostle may yet repose. The preceding extract may be viewed as the ordium of an original history to follow, wherein if we fail, it will be the boldness of the attempt and not the deed confounds us. Taking as a basis for our illustration the rules of argument, we will first identify one race and then prove that the existence of another is not only apparent but absolute. For the convenience of the general reader, the word Mexican, until the true name is established, will be applied throughout the following pages to all Central and South America, for the word South may be confounded with that portion of the Republic of North America so denominated, and especially with the American reader. The fundamental error with all writers upon the Aborigines of America is that they have viewed them as one people. Authors have therefore been confounded by the different customs and ceremonies of religion as practiced in the two great divisions of the continent. They have seen that the natives were to a certain extent in one part of the vast domain idolaters and not in the other, that the North was essentially Republican in every aspect of its political existence, while that of Mexican America was as essentially composed of kingdoms and empires and governed by despotic monarchs, and that republics were interwoven with them, and that each man in the North was a warrior and an equal, acknowledging no superior but their leader in time of battle. And should he fall in action, there was not a member of the give me one second, of the tribe in which they politically lived, but could have taken his place and filled it with similar courage and ability. In Mexican America, they were not equal, but from the inferior, they descended by degrees to the serf and slave, and that country's stone and stucco temples and palaces were and still continue to be found erected with costly magnificence, and in which were jeweled idols to which they bent the knee. Their rich dwellings were splendid mansions adorned and sculptured with beaten gold and graced with the works of art, and as a and as a people enjoying all the refined elegancies of life. But in the north, their temple was the azure canopy of Jehovah, adorned with its myriads of golden stars, and when beneath that sublime dome they bent the knee, it was to the Almighty God alone. Their palaces were the gorgeous vistas of the forest. The columns were the gigantic trees, each year increasing in their stateliness. Their shadowy and painted roofs were the far-spreading branches and nature's tinted foliages. Their mansions were those of independent wanderers, even the simple tents of Israel. As for jeweled idols and figures of beaten gold, they presented the diamonds of the human eye, radiant with the intellectual beams and glancing from the living emblem of the first and priceless image placed in Eden's garden by the architect of the universe. Notwithstanding these essential opposites in character and policy, to which may be added that of physiognomy, writers have glanced at them as one race sprung from the same branch of the human family, and without defining which, and when they could not reconcile such apparently unaccountable distinctions and diversities, they have thrown upon the shoulders of the Mexican the mantle of many virtue belonging to the North, and upon this race they have thrust the idolatrous vices and the festering robes of luxury justly claimed by the former people. And by this easy manner of disposing of a question, have seemingly satisfied themselves that by blending the crimes of both to the exclusion of the virtues of either, that they were all savages, and no matter from whence they came. Thus have they formed their conclusions concerning 50 millions of human beings, although directly in opposition to evidences of fact, to deductions by relative reasoning, and to all Christian feeling, which alone should have rejected so cruel a decision, founded as it is not only on slight but careful investigation, meaning they were deemed to be savages, both the North and the South Americas, the people of them, in which they are Israelites. They are the Hebrew lineage of Genesis. This writer is saying that it was cruel of them that they would even try to denounce all of those human beings as being savages. This is what he wrote to the king. I'll continue. A sufficient identity of the northern native is now required in order to establish the national distinction between the aboriginals of the two Americas. In all civilized countries, when the lex scripta fails to develop or protect the historical events and rights of a nation or an individual, then the lex non scripta is not only not rejected, but it is actually brought forward to establish and support the customs and privileges of a bygone day. This traditionary evidence handed down from sire to son is received in proof of a foregone conclusion. It gives an insight into the times of which no written record is left for the investigation of Argus-eyed posterity. It carries us back to the customs, civil, military, and religious that otherwise might be lost to the archives of history. Admitting, therefore, this train of reasoning, we bring it to bear upon the present important subject, important in the highest degree, for the time is now past when the Western Hemisphere is to be dated from the rediscovery by Columbus. So they already know that this time would be, it would come soon. That the people that veil would be lifted off of the Israelites, and that they would know, be able to find the documents, find the readings that would validate what we probably already knew, what we had already been taught, and then definitely the truth. Admitting, therefore, this train of reasoning, we bring it to bear upon the present important subject, important in the highest degree, for the time is now past when the Western Hemisphere is to be dated from the rediscovery by Columbus, his giant but over-applauded name, like the ruins of Palenque, Palenque, Palenque is but the lettering of a volume to indicate in the library of the universe that such a work was written. The work itself, in other words, the great continent, has yet to be read. So this writer is letting the king know that Columbus lied, but they didn't care because Columbus made them money. He originally made them money with the riches, but 1776 had already taken place. And that means that London still had some kind of financial ties, but they also sent a writer, a researcher out to get the truth and actually to find out if the Indians were the Hebrew Israelites of the book of Genesis. He reported back to the king, and this book is documented and stored at the Library of Congress in America, and you can get it online for free. And it is also stored in England. I will go ahead and continue. In other words, the great continent has yet to be read, and the historical authors identified, nor will the well-grounded supposition that the Welsh Prince Madoc colonized in America 2 centuries before the Genesis, or that the Norwegian landed 3 centuries anterior to the Welsh, enable us even to unclasp the volume to accomplish this. And its translation and historic Iliad must be cast over a period of more than 2,000 annual changes of nature's revolving but faithful time glass. Wow. Granting then that when the lex scriptor will not cover a subject, the lex non-scriptor must be investigated to establish a position. The first then will not apply to the Aborigines of the North, for it does not exist. The latter only, or the unwritten history of their race, must be had recourse to prove their originality and identity, traceable back to time, immemorial from their present customs and traditions. I'm going to continue because that is very, very deep. We think that it will constantly be admitted the religious ceremonies are the strongest proofs of the characteristic of the people or the race. And I already told you, especially with the Church of God in Christ and the who is that? The Apostolic, who else? The Pentecost, all of those, their whole ceremonies is of the Aboriginal religion. The Holy Ghost, I've already researched this, 2017. It is Aboriginal or Amerindian in nature and in spirit. All right. So let me continue, please. I've already read 33, almost probably like 20 pages. Some of it was blank, but with what we've already read, it's already deep. I don't know what you're going to do with this information, but he's describing in the last 4 chapters that as if a veil was going to be lifted, this day would come where the truth would be able to be sought after and found. And then knowing the information and being able to claim your identity. Because everyone knows what happened to the Amerindian. We've already went over lineage, even in this book. We've already went over the connection of what this author stated when he did his research in the 1800s and reported back to the king of the connection of who the Aboriginals are. He distinctively described the land of Mexico, the connection between the two, how wrong it was for them to say that we were savages, or you already know it's abomination. They're going to hell for what they did to us. There is no doubt about it. So how do we walk this earth with all the other atrocities of any curses prior to that? So many people, even an atheist, believe in God. It's just not his God. So how do we walk this earth knowing this information? It's one, our responsibility to pass it along to our children, grandchildren, people we know, and those who want to listen. The age of information, as I already told you, Steve Jobs was not here for nothing. He did his job, whether somebody wanted to hush him up and took him out, or God took him out. I've already pointed out to you, it said in scriptures that when will I come? No man knows when I come, but I come when everybody has had the word. And I questioned 20 years ago, how would everybody know with all these third world countries that they claim are third world? All these third world countries, they don't have radio and TV, and in my mind, I picture them in, straw skirts, nude. So how would they know? And if you look on any social media site, you'll see third world countries with cell phones. So we all had an opportunity to edify. This is what this is all about. I'm going to continue. Hopefully, chapter 1 will not be that long. And then I will have to continue this on another day. This is a 492-page book. I'll point out where this PDF can be found at, and I will actually place it at the bottom of the banner when I get out of this book. So I'm going to continue. Hopefully, you all can get whatever you need. Take your phone around with you. I like seeing mine on the big screen. If you're seeing this on a cell phone, I thank you for even joining me. I'm going to go ahead and continue. So it says religious ceremonies are the strongest proofs of the characteristics of a people or a race. Think about what they're talking about, the religious ceremonies, because the church, some of the powwows on the north and the north, south, east coast, I've never been to a powwow. But those churches that those Amerindians are in, do you really think that it's just that spirit is just fake? Do you think that it is is I'm trying to get you to visualize, where could this culture come from? Even with the slightest bit of forced assimilation, remember, they still show us hate. They still reject us. Therefore, we're still building our own cultures. Where do you think this culture is? It's a Amerindian culture. The dance, the music. Even though they manufactured our clothing and put them in the stores, and we bought what we wanted to buy, the culture is of our ancestors. All right, reading that again. Religious ceremonies are the strongest proofs of the characteristics of a people or a race of which no written history exists. But there is something so indescribably sacred in the consensuous actions of a man with the supreme God that none but the maniac atheist, I'm telling you, I have not read this, and the wordings that I am using, the terminologies that I'm using, I brought up atheists. I have not even read this. I have not even read this. I'm telling you, I have not read this. I've read the preface. I actually put the print screen of the PDF on my TikTok, but I have not read this. So that means that I'm in tune, and I'm happy that I'm in tune with this, right? Sacred in the consensuous actions of man with the supreme God that none but the maniac atheist could doubt. The maniac atheist, not the atheist, because the atheists know about God. And that's exactly how I'm telling you, I didn't see this. That those actions should be received as the living features of a nation, which seem to be recognized and acknowledged with as much certainty of identity as when a mother gazes upon her fondly cherished child. The customs forming the analogy between the northern natives and the ancient Israelites will now be reviewed with as much brevity as the subject will permit in order to establish an essential point of the present theory, viz., the separation of the Aborigines into two distinct people. The reader perhaps will meet us at the threshold of argument by the question, how can an Indian be of Israel? I'm telling you, through my, I'm tearing up here. I'm telling you that I know this and I feel this through my blood and spirit. And I keep saying, even though I keep hearing people talking about, we're not Israelites. I'm telling you, I've already traced me back to Shem. That's not even with the deep dive that I was doing with my true ancestry. And if Shem, you have to understand the genesis of how Shem was born and who is the descendants of Shem after that. And then you hear this, and then you're like, okay, some people hold on to it and not done their research. And then I'm telling you the inkling of this. How can an Indian be of Israel? You better wake up. You better know who you are. You better learn and read. And for the most part, share the information to those who want to listen. How can an Indian be of Israel? We will answer this and refute the misnomer before the analogies are investigated. The name Indian, as applied to the original inhabitants of either or both the Americas, Canada, the islands in or adjacent to the Gulf of Mexico, and has no authority founded upon truth. It's just the name. The name was given in error, as he is reporting back to the king. It has been so continued from the time of the Genocides to the present date. It's just a name that Columbus came up with. Throughout this work, no position will be advanced that cannot be defended. The wrongful appellation originated with Columbus, and for a proof, of the assertion, the following is presented. So what do we do with the term Amerindian? I use that term to, I think to not tie in, but to a certain, a collective of people, which is the North and Southeast Coast Aboriginal Indigenous. So sometimes when we hear people and they're adamant and they stand firm on terminology that they use or what they learn, you have people arguing and saying that we are not Indian, we're not Black, we're not African American. They're saying this no matter how frustrated a person may be. I'm not talking about the people that are denying anything about the African Americans. We're not talking about the racist ones towards them. We're talking about some people, they can't grasp certain terminologies until it goes through the psyche and critical thinking and research and theories are proven on their own or with assistance. Until then, a person can't grasp the concept. So when you're reading and you're on TikTok and you're seeing people saying, I'm not Indian, we're not Indian, and then they clarify, I'm telling you, this stuff is deep. It is deep. I thank the ancestors for allowing me to have this knowledge, to even do this, to bring it to light. I feel blessed. I'm literally in tears. I feel blessed. All right, I'm going to continue. The wrongful appellation originated with Columbus, and for proof of the assertion, the following is presented. The shadow of the earth upon the moon during an eclipse plainly testified that the planet upon which we live was round. The travels of Marco Polo by land to the East Indies about 1269 related that those lands stretched far towards the east. About 2 centuries after this, it occurred to Columbus upon pursuing those travels, but more especially from having obtained intelligence from the final conquest of the Canary Islands in 1483, and I got some ancestors there too, and information while resident in England, which circumstances will be investigated thereafter. He is in 1843 saying he is investigating this stuff, writing this back to the king. And you better believe he's not lying to him. That by a voyage towards the west, those traveling, as it were, around the globe, he should meet the extremities of these lands, of those lands, and as the discovery of a sea passage to the East Indies was the great object of navigation. In the 15th century, Columbus made the bold attempt, founded upon previous knowledge. He didn't know himself. Founded upon previous knowledge of migration, and discovered the island of St. Salvador and those adjacent, and thinking that he had reached the eastern extremity of the Indies according to his theory. He thought that he had reached the West Indies. He then named those isles the West Indies because they were discovered by sailing west. The discovery of the continent followed during his 3rd voyage, and believing all of the land to be of the Indies, the inhabitants of the isles and the mainland were, as a natural consequence, called by Columbus under one general appellation, viz., Indians. Subsequent geographical discoveries have proven the great era of the Genealogists But the name of the Indian was given at that time, and it has been continued, although at variance with the truth, and it has had a material effect in checking inquiry. Looks like somebody added that, but I don't know. Concerning the Aboriginals who have been called Indians, the name seemed at once to specify their origin, but it would have been equally as just if he had determined to sail for Britain and an unforeseen gale having cast him upon the island of Sardinia, and then from believing that he had reached the intended object of his voyage, he should have called the latter inhabitants British. We therefore discard the name of Indian as applied to the natives of the Western continent. It will be retained in the tragedy of Tecumseh for local purposes and write of them as the Aborigines until, as we advance in this history, they can be identified by a name, national name founded upon facts and conclusion. What do we do at this point? Because a lawyer, we got Black lawyers that aren't saying anything. We have Black historians that are not saying anything. We have directors and administration of universities running natural history or history, world history, or history of the Americas. Not saying anything. Here this book is saying that the name is wrong, who we are, and as if he's waiting for us to identify and claim who we are. All right, so chapter 2. I am not going to go into chapter 2. I am going to leave that for another time. So we have chapter 2. Well, and I'm going to read just this paragraph to give you a head start on what chapter 2's live will be. Hebrew analogies with the tribes of the North contrasted with the natives of Mexican America, circumcision, scalping, its great antiquity, the crucifixion not known to the natives of the North, their traditional knowledge of the deluge, their practice of the laws of Moses, the conclusive proofs of the two races, the formation of a new epochian table for the history of ancient America, the announcement of the historical theory and the first epoch. Leading into chapter 2. So when you can, go ahead and get a copy of this PDF. I am going to put that up there for you, where you can find that PDF at. It will be at the banner, at the bottom of the banner. So go ahead and look for that. Let me remove this book. And here's the banner. So hopefully you can catch that. I did want to go into the browser so you can see how it looks. But the website is down there. I know you can't copy and paste it, but you surely can type at least 3 or 4 of it. The title of the book, I can go back into the title of the book, but I want to take you to the browser where you can see where the book actually is. I don't even see it no more. I had all this up here ready for you guys, especially Plecker's picture. So now does it make sense why Plecker would do what he did? And that book was written in 1843, way before Plecker. This is 100 years after Plecker. So Plecker he was one of the persons or one of the people that did not want you to know anything about this book. He didn't want you to know. So what do you do with this information? People from across the the globe, who has been land taken over, killed, colonized as well. What do you do with this information? Do you continue to spread that the African Americans is lazy, trash, garbage, killers, ignorant, stupid, dumb? What do you do with this information that you know that we are the chosen one, that you know that we are blessed, that you know that we are the lineage of Genesis? What do you do with that information? All right, so I'm trying to get you back to where these books are at, so you can see the cost of this book. I don't want that. Let's see here. So actually, it's at the Library of Congress. How about go to www.loc, which is the Library of Congress, loc.gov, or don't type in .gov. Well, okay, type in www.loc.gov, and then you go into space, and then you're going to put the history of ancient America, and that should be enough to bring that book up. As you can see, let me share this with you. As you can see that this book is with the Library of Congress. It should be popping up for you. There you go. All right, it's at the Library of Congress. It is free as a download, as you can see right here to the left. It should be coming along soon. It's kind of going slow. All right. To the left, you see it is in PDF format or any other formats. The rest are pictures. The rest is text. You don't want that. You want that PDF. Leave it at PDF. You press go. It will download. Here is what it is about, what the book is about. The names of the persons that gathered the information, which is George Jones. He began gathering the information in 1810 through 1879. These are your publishers. London and New York, Harper, all of them created the books. And then there we have it. So this is Library of Congress. So perhaps you may want that link right there. This link here is a much easier link. So maybe you would want to write that down. I will go ahead and probably put this in the chat. Hopefully, let me see if I can do that. I think I can, so I'm gonna try. Nope. All right, try it again. All right, there we go. All right, there's the link. I don't know how I got that. But anyway, there's the link. Hopefully you will be able to use the, you'll be able to download it. I don't know about anybody downloading it on their phone, but it is your choice to do what you want. You still can view it without downloading. I don't know. But remember, it's 492 pages. There you have a link. Print screen it, and you can easily go back to it at another time. All right. Now, again, you can get a copy of this document. It is with the Library of Congress and is sold in other locations, but it is free as and in PDF format at the Library of Congress.gov. So go there and get you a copy and start catching up and learning more. Edification is the goal here. And let's tie in my purpose of this live. And I'm going to tie in the purpose of the live. Give me a second. Get out of here. So we are going to tie it in. I'm going to tie it in. Now, one, I know that the Amerindians of the North and South East of America, of the Amerindians, of the Genesis lineage of the Israelites. I did not read 38 pages by myself before this live. All right, I had already wrote this. I did not read that book, and I still haven't. I've actually ventured off into that book at this moment with you. In my notes, this is what I have. One, we know that the Amerindians of the North and Southeast of the America, of the Amerindians of the Genesis lineage of the Israelites. Two, their race. The use of skin color is how the Amerindians, the Moors, and the Africans have been dumped into one classification. I'm telling you, I had not read this. The Moors and the Africans have been dumped into one classification, creating a huge issue with identity and claiming of land, that no one seems to reject the European mixture of the Amerindian, but they sure forget to tell about the Amerindians. And when they do, they have the real skin color and paint them as savages. I did not see this. Savages despite fighting for their lives and land. And four, that there has not been a full 1% pool of genetic testing of the Africans of Africa, and therefore the genetic results, meaning the percentages and ethnicity declarations, cannot fully be true. If you have not tested Africa, how could you say that the descendants of America is African? I've already showed you Plecker's letter. I've just showed you and read, I think almost 25, 30 pages in that Aboriginal original connection of the Israelites book. So of course, ancestry is not going to tell the truth about the African Americans' ethnicity. Of course they're not. Therefore, the genetic results, meaning the percentages and ethnicity declarations, cannot fully be true. However, the DNA matches are on point. I have over 25,000, connecting me to those Amerindians, connecting me to those chiefs, connecting me to their European bloodline, connecting me to the royalty, and therefore do not match. And those percentages that the genetic companies are giving out, they do not match what is in my tree, in my own tree, and the ethnicities in my own tree. They don't connect. Trying to tie in that the lies and Walter Plecker's plan and his ability to control the state's way of handling the classifications on those birth certificates, death certificates, documentations. How white supremacy won one or the other race. The Aboriginal race connects you to the land, connects you to the power. So therefore, you just think about all those Black people in city to city, state to state, in jail. Just think about how they fell into a trap. Majority unavoidable. 3 strikes for standing in your own community and neighborhood. Why would they leave warriors in a household? It's easier to fight the woman and the kids and the grandparents and the elderly. It's very, very easy. Once again, I have many Amerindian chiefs in my ancestry, not to mention the Europeans that raped and married my ancestors and their own siblings and descendants. So I hope that you can grasp, with the assistance of this material and data already shared within books and other teachings of this subject, the same thing happened to the people of color across this globe, including within the YouTube community and that of the TikTok Aboriginal Amerindian Reclassified community there. You can and will learn a lot. So go over there and pay a visit to them. Also, specifically, take a look at the YouTube and TikTok pages of ILLZ, WILLZ 118. One of my supporters from TikTok to YouTube. I thank you so much. And that of the Aboriginal Hebrew 111. She has a wealth of information that goes in a different direction for our genealogy, meaning she digs into the state of Ohio and the Amerindians there and Israelite lineage. That means I'm on track. If you understand this and you got this and you're figuring this out and you feel it, that means you are on track. When we use our memory from our ancestors, we are on track. When we are abiding by and paying mindful attention to our instincts and discernment, we are on track. What do we do with this information? Because there's a fire going on with the young ones over there at TikTok. I'm older than them. There's a fire going on. I hope that they get the ability to actually sort all this out with what they already know. And what do they do afterwards to claim? Because it's birth certificates and death certificates that stops us from being classified correctly, but they also are the documents that get us our enrollment and classification. So what do you do with that? Hopefully this will help others in grasping what happened to the original North and Southeast Coast Aboriginals, the inhabitants before the European invasion, and that the possibility of admixture, Paper Genocide, happened as a result of land theft and forced assimilation. So when you examine genealogy, and before you force someone into a race or ethnicity based on false teachings, classism, socialism, stereotypes that always lead to discrimination, please think outside the box and do your due diligence to find out and accept the truth, unless you are trying to hold on to inherited and stolen land that you could have benefit from and still to this day benefit from. And if you're willing to not think that you're going to lose that land, then you're going to step outside that box. If not, some of you, we don't even care. We don't expect you to. But that doesn't stop the knowledge. On that note, if you have any questions or a comment, go ahead and place them in the chat. Go ahead with your comments. And if not, I want to say thank you for joining me. And please do set your notifications for the next My History Verify channel broadcast.